Hello and welcome to e-GMAT. We will solve question number 88 of OG Verbal 2nd edition by using e-GMAT 3-step process. In the first step, we will understand the meaning of the sentence. In the second, we will evaluate the errors in the sentence, and finally, we will review all the answer choices to get to the correct answer. So let's begin. Clouds are formed from the evaporation of the ocean's water that is warmed by the sun and rises high into the atmosphere, condensing in tiny droplets on minute particles of dust. This sentence presents the process of cloud formation. However, notice that the order of the events that lead to cloud formation are not written in the correct chronological order. That leads to a little ambiguity in understanding the meaning of the sentence. So what should be the correct chronology? The sun warms the ocean water that evaporates and rises into the atmosphere, and then the water cools down and condenses in tiny droplets of water on minute particles of dust, and that's how clouds are formed. Because the chronological order is not correct in this sentence, the sentence fails to communicate the meaning of the sentence in the most effective manner. Now let us split this sentence into clauses to evaluate the other errors. Here comes the first clause. Clouds are formed from the evaporation of the ocean's water. Here clouds is the subject and are formed is the verb. Presence of that brings us to another clause that reads that is warmed by the sun, and here that is the subject and is warmed is the verb. After and we have another verb, rises. Now it has the same subject that, and that stands for ocean's water. So ocean's water has two subjects, is warmed and rises, and the remaining portion of this clause reads rises high into the atmosphere, condensing in tiny droplets on minute particles of dust. Now, the chronology of the process of cloud formation is not in order as we discussed in meaning analysis, and hence we have a little confusion here. So, let's see what's the correct chronology. Sun warms water that evaporates. This water rises high into the atmosphere, cools down and condenses into tiny droplets on minute dust particles. That's how the clouds are formed. Now, because these events are not in chronological order, we have meaning issue here. Also, two things have been said about the ocean's water. That is warmed by the sun and rises high into the atmosphere. The first entity begins with that, but the second does not. And that leads to parallelism issue in this sentence. Also, these two entities do not seem to be two steps in the process of cloud formation. The way they are written, they rather seem to be two characteristics of ocean's water. Say for example, ocean's water that boil at 100 degrees centigrade, or water that becomes ice at 0 degrees centigrade. So here the way these two entities are written, they do not look like the part of the process of cloud formation. This is not the intended meaning of the sentence, so we have meaning issue again. Furthermore, it appears as though clouds are formed from evaporation of ocean water. This ocean water is warmed by the sun and rises high in the atmosphere. This is again not the intended logical sequence of events that take place. Now, on the correct understanding of the correct meaning of the sentence, we must choose that answer choice that will precisely communicate the intended meaning of the sentence. So let us run the POV to find out what's the correct answer. Well, choice A is certainly not the correct answer as we discussed just now. In choice B, well, it's again incorrect because it repeats the same chronological error as in choice A, and also this clause, which rises high, repeats the same meaning error as in A. It looks more like a characteristic again rather than a step in the process of cloud formation. So these two errors make choice B incorrect. Well, choice C is the correct answer because now here each and every step is written in the chronological order. They are written absolutely clearly And this answer choice communicates the logical intended meaning in the most effective manner. So choice C is the correct answer. Let's take a look at choice D now. Well, this modifier warmed by the sun is a verb ed modifier which typically modifies a noun. However, this modifier does not have any closed noun that it can modify, and hence it is not written and or placed correctly. Now, reference of this clause is also incorrect. In case if it is referring to the process of condensation of evaporated water to form dust particles, then grammatically it is incorrect, because being a noun clause, which clause cannot refer to an action. And suppose if it is referring to the closest noun dust, then logically it is not correct, because dust does not form clouds. So in both ways, which clause does not have a proper reference. So choice D is not correct. Let's take a look at choice E now. Well, in choice E, the which clause illogically refers to the atmosphere, meaning that atmosphere condenses in tiny droplets. This is incorrect. So for this error, choice E is not correct. So as we found out earlier, choice C is the correct answer. Now let's take a look at the takeaway messages. The sentence must be constructed appropriately to communicate the logical intended meaning in the most effective manner. The entities in a parallel list must be grammatically as well as logically parallel to each other. Also, the relative pronoun modifiers are noun modifiers and can only modify noun entities. Also, the modifiers must be placed and worded correctly to communicate the clear intended meaning of the sentence. The concepts tested in this sentence have been covered in e-GMAT concepts, level 1 types of modifiers, level 1 correcting modifiers, and level 2 modifiers relative pronouns.